Vikela.earth.
Okay, hi, welcome all. My name is Michael Brosnan. I'm the founder of Vikela, a wonderful team of passionate humanitarians and conservationists. Captain Paul Watson, I'm a big fan of yours as well. So you've got a big fan base here this evening. Kimberley, welcome. And dear Dr. Linda Penfold, thanks for making an effort to be here this evening, and to the team members that are present. I often get asked why the name Vikela.earth. Well, Vikela, the word, is a Zulu word, and loosely translated, it means protect and embrace. And because we are an entity founded in Africa, it rings true. We are here to protect and embrace and do what we can. But we realized when we formed the entity a few years ago that there needed to be a paradigm shift in the way conservation initiatives are undertaken, and to progress research that will be undertaken. So how does one do that? The only way to do that is to try and collaborate with as many like-minded entities and people of similar passion, build the intellect base that way, and progress the research that way, and hopefully the outcomes of the initiatives that we implement will be far more sustainable. But we are focused today on this Boma, and Boma is a Swahili word, also an African word, and it means a enclosure or chat room of sorts, a gathering of minds where people get together, communities get together, and they discuss matters of common interest. And Ocean Day, in my humble opinion, should be every day. We shouldn't even be named Planet Earth, we should be named Planet Ocean. If we have a look, it's our biggest ecosystem, our biggest carbon sink. And you know, we're facing enormous challenges. Every day there's more evidence of hypoxia, or commonly known as dead zones. We also know that some of the coral reef restoration that has taken place has not been successful, and there's been bleaching again on the Great Barrier Reef. And this is where collaboration, research, and science is so important. You know, our Dr. Linda Penfold, who's our research director and is the founder and CEO of her entity, is recognized in the field of reproduction of endangered species. And endangered species includes coral, you know, and sperm banking thereof. So, you know, I'm just a passionate ocean man, and my love, and I see Vian is also part of the Boma this evening. Vian is a close associate of mine, and was one of the founding members as well. He goes out to sea daily, and you know, he is privileged to see the big five, ocean big five, possibly every day, but maybe not every day, but certain sharks. But if we have a look at the number of great white sharks in the area where shark diving or cage diving take place, and the research takes place, I mean, those numbers have dwindled radically. And there are many reasons for it. Some would say, yes, it's orca predation. Well, orca predation is natural predation. It's not just purely orca. There are two orca brothers that prey on on our great whites on the coastline of South Africa. Important starboard, but that's not the only reason. There are many reasons for it. But I'm just going to introduce our co-hosts this evening. Stuart is our director of production, film, and editing and documentaries. Nozipo Ndweni is our head of partnerships and advocacy. She puts together our Bomas and our webinar series. And Teresa is one of our international awareness ambassadors. Excuse me. And then I'd just like to say too that Katie, based in the UK, moves between the UK and Portugal, and we are opening up, hopefully in the next 6 months, our footprint in Portugal, and Katie will man that for us. And then a very warm welcome, obviously, to the guests, but I'm going to hand you over to our facilitator now, Teresa Cole, and welcome to all of you. Over to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for doing this. A huge thank you to Captain Watson. As I said earlier, not only are you a personal hero to me, but such a huge person being willing to spend your time. And it is so important what you're doing to do this. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm not going to go into who you are because I've got absolutely no right to do that, because everybody knows who you are. So I'm just going to ask you to explain to us what you feel about climate change and global warming.
Well, you know, the strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. So therefore, a strength of any movement has to be in diversity. So whether that be approach be education or litigation or legislation or direct intervention, it all works towards the same end. But what I've chosen to do over the last 50 years really is to focus on intervening or interventions against illegal activities. Primarily, we're an anti-poaching group. And I've gone through many transitions. I was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and I founded the Sea Shepard Conservation Society. But actually, I was ousted from Sea Shepard last year for being too confrontational and being too controversial. So I set up the Captain Paul Watson Foundation to continue to do what I've been doing all of this time. We recently just came back from Iceland, where as soon as we arrived, the killing of the whales for this summer was shut down, at least until the end of August, and we may be going back in September if they decide to reverse that ban. And now we're going to be heading up to the Faroe Islands to protect pilot whales and dolphins, and also to investigate super trawler operations up along the coast of Scotland. But I think that the greatest threat right now to the planet is really that since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. And why is this happening? It's because we've diminished populations of whales and dolphins and seabirds and other creatures in the sea. And those creatures are really the farmers of the phytoplankton. They provide the nutrient base, the magnesium, the nitrogen, the iron. And when you reduce that, the nutrient base, you reduce the phytoplankton population. And the fact is that if phytoplankton were to disappear from the ocean, we all die. We don't live on this planet without phytoplankton. It is the very foundation of life. And for the most part, people are unaware of that. But and the reason it's being diminished is because of what we're doing with overfishing, killing the whales, killing off seabirds, for everything from direct fishing to pollution, noise pollution, chemical pollution, all sorts of things. Basically, this assault that we have on the planet Earth. One of the things I try to get, especially when talking to children, and I just did a children's book on this, is to try and get people to look at the ocean from a different point of view. We tend to think of the ocean as the sea, but it's actually more than that. It's a planet. It's the planet ocean, but it's water in continuous circulation. So sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes locked in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the atmosphere, and sometimes in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet, which means that water is constantly flowing through all of those mediums. So the question is, what is the ocean? The answer is we are the ocean. We're part of that. It's a very complex thing, and we're part of it. And what we do to the ocean, we do to ourselves. And the other thing I'd like to try to get across to people is the fact that if you look at this planet for what it is, which is a spaceship, we're this incredibly large spaceship that's on this voyage around the Milky Way galaxy. It takes 250 million years to do one orbit. And every spaceship has a life support system, and that provides us with the air we breathe, the food we eat, and regulates climate and temperature. And that life support system is run by a crew of engineers. And we humans, we're passengers. We're having a lovely time entertaining ourselves. But what we're also doing is we're murdering engineers. We're killing them off. And each and every day, we're killing these engineers, the worms, the bees, the fishes, the phytoplankton, all of those creatures that make it possible for us to be here because of the ecological law of interdependence. We need them. But we tend to think in our anthropocentric sort of delusions that we are the only species that matter. We're the top of everything. It was all created for us. And therefore, we forget that we're part of everything else. And that will be our undoing. If we have to take a biocentric approach. We have to look at it from that point of view, that we're part of everything and everything is connected with us. You know, a few years ago, I had a reporter from Fox News call me up and he said, "Did you say that worms, trees, bees, and fish were more important than people?" And I said, "Yeah, I said that." He said, "Well, how could you say something so outrageous as to say worms, trees, bees, and fish are more important than people?" I said, "Because they are. Because they can live here without us, but we can't live here without them. We need them. They don't need us." That ecologically, that makes them far more important than we are, because these are the species that maintain life upon this planet. And for the most part, we're quite parasitical in the way, in our approach to all of this. We're taking all the fish out of the oceans, cutting down all the trees on land, and we're doing things that we're not even consciously aware that we're doing. And therefore, we're in violation of the three basic laws of ecology each and every day. And the first being the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The second, the law of interdependence, that all those species are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity from other species, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence. And that leads to ecological collapse. And unless we become aware of that and take action to do something about it, then our time on this planet is going to be measured in decades, centuries or decades, but certainly not longer than that, because we have proven to be extremely irresponsible. And again, it comes down to what values are. When we value something, we fight for it. If you take a look at, imagine somebody going into the city of Mecca and spitting on the stone, or attacking the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, or a statue of the Madonna, say, in Rome. People will get extremely angry. They'll become violent in their defense of a wall in Jerusalem, or a chunk of meteorite in Mecca. But each and every day we go into the most beautiful and mysterious and wonderful cathedrals of the natural world, the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, the rainforests of Amazonia, and we totally desecrate and destroy these cathedrals with chainsaws and bulldozers and bottom track drawlers and everything. And how do we react to that? For the most part, we do nothing. We send in letters of protests, or we have a protest with picket signs and everything. But if the rainforests, if the Great Barrier Reef, if the whales and all these other species were as valuable to us as an old piece of meteorite in Mecca, or an old wall in Jerusalem, or a hunk of marble in Rome, we would rise up and defend it with all of the passion and courage that we could muster. But that's because of our anthropocentric point of view, that it's all about us. And unless we adopt that biocentric point of view, then we're not going to have much of a future. So that's what we're doing with the group, the Captain Paul Watson Foundation. The reason I called it the Captain Paul Watson Foundation, by the way, is they took Sea Shepard away from me. It's pretty hard to take away an organization that's your own name. So I kept it for that reason. But we're going to carry on and do what we can. And hopefully we can inspire others to do things both on land and in the ocean, and to understand that we can make a difference. Each and every one of us can make a difference. And I don't really get depressed or pessimistic about the future, because I know that I have no power over the future. But what we do have power over is the present. And what we do in the present will define what the future will be. So therefore, we have to really focus all of our energies, all of our skills, all of our abilities to do everything we can in the present to make sure that there is a future. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Captain Watson. In my opinion, Sea Shepherds has had this, you're the leaders at what you do because you take such an active stance of don't you dare, just don't push your luck. But how important is it rather to educate as opposed to taking dramatic action?
Well, as I said at the beginning, it's all important because that's diversity is where the strength lies in any movement. Education, litigation, legislation, direct intervention, they all work towards the same end. So we're all working for the same thing. We just go about it in different ways, depending upon what our skills and our abilities are. And that's really all that we can do.
At this point, thank you, Captain Watson, for your time. If you'd like to stick around with us, that's up to you. And then we would like to introduce the next speaker at this point, yes. So our next speaker is going to be Kimberley Ray, and she's the CEO and founder of Marine Conservation in the USA. Like to take it from there.
Thank you, everybody, for having me on the meeting today. And Captain Paul, I'm really honored that you're here with us today. This is fantastic that you actually thought you're joining us today. I'm flabbergasted, sorry. Okay, so for everybody who doesn't know me, I am Kimberley Ray. I am the CEO and the founder of Marine Conservation Network. We're based in Santa Barbara, California. And my love for the ocean actually goes all the way back from when I was a kid. Obviously, I grew up in Florida. I was always on the ocean. My father was a recreational fisherman, and I just grew to love the ocean with everything in it and around it, and did everything I could to learn about it. Went to school for it, volunteered about it, everything. The Marine Conservation Network, actually the concept started here in Santa Barbara when I was working over at the Sea Center here at Stearns Wharf. I was there working at the shark station where we had to educate everybody that came around that learned about the sharks and all of our marine life here that's local. But I was instructed to speak only on scientific terms. And don't get me wrong, I respect the scientists, I respect conservationists. They're the ones who really got a lot of information in me as to what's going on out in the ocean. But in talking to the public in Latin terms and scientific terms, I found nobody was interested. I found nobody understood and nobody connected as to why these animals are special, why they're important, and why the ocean's important. So when I went through that process, I realized that there's actually a disconnect. And that's where the big issue is, I feel, in society, is that you've got the general public where some people love the ocean, some people don't. And then you've got the scientists who learn about the ocean, but they've got their own little clique and their own little conversation and their own little words, but the public doesn't know what they're saying or what they're doing or what they're planning. So therefore, the scientists, they stay private. They work on their grants and their funds and their projects, and they want the public to get involved to help conserve and protect, but the public doesn't know what is going on. They don't understand phylum chordata. They don't understand, what is a phytoplankton or zooplankton. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a community to where they understood, not dumbing it down to where, oh, this is a little fishy, we don't want to insult them, but they want them to understand exactly what is going on, what are we talking about, and why is this so important. And just like Captain Paul said, the ocean is our life support. We cannot survive without the ocean. But if we weren't here, the ocean would be fine. But unfortunately, we're all here at once, so we have to work together. So I created Marine Conservation Network to educate the public on what's going on in their terms. But we also feel it's important to educate the youth, because the youth are the ones that are going to be here tomorrow to protect the oceans and to teach their children and so forth. So we've got a youth ambassador program that we've started out here in Santa Barbara, along with the high schools. We are actually dealing out here, I don't know if Captain Paul is aware of this, with our domoic acid that is really going crazy out here with the sea lions and the dolphins being washed ashore. And you would be amazed how many people really don't understand what's going on with the water's warming and the pollution and the plastic. There's over 8 million tons of plastic entering the ocean every day. And every day, with me anyway, it looks like we're just about getting there on making a big difference. And then all of a sudden, another big trash is found in the ocean, or another oil spill, or another big set of ghost nets are out there. We've got to continuously get people out there to make a difference and to make an impact. And I love the fact that we're all working together with Vikela.earth and MCN and Captain Paul and everybody else. I'm so glad that everybody is doing this and we're all working together. And I'm glad that we're actually getting the word out. I don't know. I really don't know what else to talk about, because I know everybody here knows the situation with the plastic and the pollution. I'm sure everybody's aware with all the climate change. I just want to make sure that we all spread the word and educate as many people as possible, because that's the key there, is education and connecting hearts to the ocean.
Thank you so very much, Kimberly. So I think what we can do now is, last but not least, move to Dr. Linda Penfold, and then perhaps open up for questions for everybody, because these three gurus together, it's just too much. So Dr. Linda, through to you.
Thank you, Teresa. Hello to everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I'm Linda Penfold from the Southeast Zoo Alliance for Reproduction and Conservation, which we abbreviate to SEZARC because that's a lot easier to manage. But I'm here today on Vikela.earth's behalf. And in a true scientist fashion, I have slides prepared. So I'm going to share my screen and go through just a few slides just to help me with the way I'm going to chat with you guys. So let's see. All righty. Okay, so we work predominantly with zoos and aquariums, mainly in the US, but we also do a little bit of work, and we certainly collaborate with institutions all around the world. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the role of aquariums when it comes to the ocean and how they can support conservation, not just for sharks, actually for lizardbrants in general. So why do we have aquariums? Well, initially they would have started out as a place to go to have fun and enjoy yourself, but there has been a huge shift over the last sort of 25 years. And now one of the primary roles is education, which we've just heard quite a bit about, and the critical role that that plays. So education is a huge part of the program of aquariums. They also are involved in conducting research. And what is less well known about aquariums is their role in conservation. So yes, it's a great place to go with the family, but at the same time, there's a lot else that's going on. And I'm going to chat with you a little bit about what that can be. So and I completely echo what Teresa and Paul were saying, and Kim, about the role of education, and this great quote by Baba Diom from the IUCN, founding member of the IUCN. In the end, we will conserve only what we love, and we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. So being able to understand the ocean and all the amazing species in there, that is the role for some of us, whether we're scientists or conservationists or people work in the aquarium industry. It's all about trying to help people understand the importance of these incredible creatures. So we don't do a lot of education ourselves at my company. We conduct research, and we do a lot of research to help understand various species. We have been doing work trying to understand the sand tiger shark, and what we've been looking at is working with sand tiger sharks in aquaria as ambassadors for their wild counterparts to try and understand the biology behind them. We know that temperature and nutrition play an incredible role for these ocean species. And what we hope is by publishing this data, we can provide data for conservationists that they can factor in when they're trying to do their conservation programs. I'm telling you a little bit more about our work and how this plays in. So we are able to handle sharks both in our aquaria, which are the photos on the left and the middle, and in the wild. And you'll see ultrasound being conducted against a female sand tiger shark in the wild. And we can collect data and biological samples to help track hormones to figure out what's going on with the basic biology. And this is just to kind of show you on the left of the graph, and you can see if the months are January through to December, how they change over the course of time. And that is in sync with the sand tiger shark's migratory route. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the differences in concentrations between aquarium sharks and in situ sharks, which we now know is due to water temperature. So we've been able to figure out that the role of water temperature is a critical key in turning on reproduction in sand tiger sharks. And once we realize that, we've been able to analyze the data and figure out that the role of temperature is probably the most critical thing, and only a difference of 2 to 4 degrees can actually switch on the reproductive system in female sand tiger sharks. And this is what is needed to bring them into a breeding situation. Once we understand that basic concept, we realize that whilst we're looking at sand tiger sharks migrating up and down the east coast of North America, we know roughly halfway up around North Carolina is where a lot of them hang out. And we think that's going to be probably a birthing ground. And so you might suggest that this is a key critical birthing area for sand tiger sharks, and you might want to conserve that particular part of the eastern seaboard. However, because we're seeing the role of temperature in switching on and off reproduction, what's going to happen as our oceans warm is those migratory routes are going to shift north. So whilst critical habitat today might be North Carolina, 50 years from now, it might be up in New York or further. So by providing this data to conservationists, it perhaps helps them sort of when they're making decisions, understand that rather than conserve one particular area, you may want to be conserving a whole area along the eastern seaboard, including areas where we don't have sand tiger sharks, but where we might predict them to be 50 years from now. And this is the sort of data you can collect only when you have these animals in managed populations, where you can study them and you can conduct ultrasound and get information that then applies back to their wild counterparts. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to talk about another area where aquariums can help with conservation. And this is a global project going on with the conservation of zebra sharks. And this is taking place in Indonesia. And the focus here is the zebra shark. And I don't know if we have any families watching at home, but for those of you that may have families, you might want to ask yourselves, why is the zebra shark called a zebra shark when it's covered with spots? Well, the answer to that is because when they're little, they actually have stripes. So they're called zebra sharks because when they were little, they have stripes. But obviously when they grow up, they do actually lose those stripes. But anyway, these zebra shark have been basically eradicated from certain areas in Indonesia. And so the plan is actually to work collectively, and this is something called a one plan approach. And this one plan approach includes aquariums, local communities in Indonesia, government, oh, here's our local communities, conservation NGOs, and academia. And by having all these stakeholders involved, you can develop a plan that will help perhaps conserve the zebra shark. So again, this is a very condensed version of this project. And so what they're doing is at the bottom, you'll see two little zebra shark and some eggs. And so locally, they are breeding and hatching zebra sharks from eggs and putting the offspring straight back into this marine conservation area in Raja Ampat. This is where the sharks have been extirpated, but which we know historically were found quite widely before they were fished out. Above, you'll see two eggs and a plane. So in the US, what they're doing is they are flying eggs out to Indonesia, where they are either placed directly in the wild or they are given to the stakeholders in Raja Ampat where they are hatched, and then the offspring are placed into the wild. And I will sort of point out there's a lot of background to this study where the genetics have been done of both remnant populations in the Raja Ampat region and the animals that are in the collections in the US. And it's a holistic approach to conservation that involves the local community, NGOs, governments, scientists to figure out how best to do this, to try and get this one plan approach. So, and this is just to show broadly, is it going to make a difference if we put these sharks back out into the wild? And basically, the purple line at the bottom shows that if we do nothing, they are extremely vulnerable and run a risk of complete extinction. A pessimistic model shows that you're going to get somewhere around 350 animals over a period of time, and with a best guess estimate of up to nearly 600, and then a little bit of an optimistic one of just over 800. So if you do a population viability modeling, you can show that by doing these sort of Head Start programs and returning animals to the wild, when you've got the measures in place, which includes all those education components we talked about, you can actually help grow a population. This is just to point out the one plan is also now being approached both for eagle rays and for the bowmouth guitarfish. And my group is involved with the bowmouth guitarfish. And so we're currently collecting samples from animals in aquaria to have a look at the genetic composition. And we are linking up with people who are doing work in the wild to better understand what the needs are there from a conservation perspective. And again, for those of you that have families at home, because I wasn't quite sure who would be watching, if there are little folks at home, if you want to figure out what to do to help, you can read books about sharks and rays. You can visit your nearest aquarium and see if you can find some of these species. You could visit the beach and make sure you treat it with respect, with no littering. Or you could just select an ocean species that you've heard about today, whether it's phytoplankton or a bowmouth guitarfish, and learn all you can about it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Penfold. So I'm going to hand over to my board and wonder if there's anyone asking any questions over there. I'm sure everyone's dying to talk to you. So, Stuart, anything that you'd like to say at this point?
Yeah, so just a question to Captain Paul. What are the major factors responsible for decreasing phytoplankton?
Sorry, the major factors in what?
For decreasing phytoplankton. Why is our phytoplankton dying off?
I think, my opinion is because of the diminishment of species that provide the nutrient base for the phytoplankton, whales, seabirds, fishes, and everything. One blue whale every day defecates 3 tons onto the surface, which is heavily rich in iron and nitrogen and that. And so, whales are literally the farmers of the ocean. So when you reduce surpopulations, you reduce other species that provide those nutrient base, you're going to reduce phytoplankton populations. And of course, there's also factors like, pollution, of course, that is also contributing to their diminishment. And
global warming, does that have a big effect?
Well, I'm sure it has an effect too, because that affects the migration of different species, and also the migration or the whereabouts of phytoplankton species too at the same time. And of course, we're also having more outbreaks of dinoflagellates, red tides and things like this. It's caused by global warming. At the COP21 in Paris, I was talking there in 2015, and I said, really, the solution to protecting the ocean is to do nothing. And what I mean by that is leave it alone. Let it give it time to heal the damage we've done to it. We should have a complete moratorium on industrialized fishing for at least 50 years. We've got to stop. We can't be doing ocean mining. We've got to stop dumping plastics into the ocean and everything. Let's give the ocean the opportunity to heal the damage that we've done to it.
Okay. Which leads me to another question, if I may. If we well, maybe not ban, but let's say we limit the amount of fishing in the oceans, does aquaculture then play a role, because something needs to replace that? And how dangerous is it to get into that space?
Aquaculture is extremely destructive to the ocean, especially with the raising of salmon. I mean, you've got to catch all these fish out of the sea in order to provide the food pellets to feed the salmon. Plus, there's a zoonotic transmission of viruses from salmon farms to indigenous salmon populations. There's a heavy use of antibiotics and chemicals in salmon farming and that, which is causing die-offs of crustaceans in areas where they're that. It's the infestation of sea lice that's coming from going to the indigenous populations from the salmon farms. I mean, we got to get, Alaska has a far healthier fish population than British Columbia, where salmon farms are very prevalent in British Columbia. And the reason I think for that is because of those salmon farms. And that's why Alaska is dead set against having them.
Okay.
Hi, yeah. I have a couple questions. My first one is, do you think to increase MPAs globally, do you think that would be a good path to take? We just had a debate here in California where they wanted to put more MPAs along the whole coastal line of California to prevent the anglers from going out. But obviously that didn't pass. They're not going to put any more MPAs. They've stopped it. Is that something that you think would be actually beneficial if we took that more global and did more MPAs around the world? And this could be Dr. Paul or anybody. Captain Paul, sorry.
My opinion on that is that MPAs are useless without enforcement. And we've got a lot of places around the Galapagos, for instance, where we've been working for years. What's the point of having a protected marine reserve if poachers can just come in? In fact, that's where the poachers go. They go to the MPAs because they know that's where they're going to find fish that they've wiped out everywhere else. And the problem is there's very little enforcement, very little real enforcement. There's a lot of posturing and everything, but the enforcement is really lacking. And that's what I've been trying to intervene in for all the, the last 50 years, is trying to provide that enforcement. And of course, we get called vigilantes and eco-terrorists and everything doing it, but we're opposing illegal operations. But apparently, like, illegal operations are more acceptable socially than anybody trying to interfere with those illegal operations.
Right. And that leads to my second question, is about having a global size enforcement for marine conservation, because like you said, there's plenty of laws out there, plenty of MPAs out there, but there's not the manpower to enforce all the laws and the rules. Is there anything, I mean, what can we do to kind of change that? Is it just changing people's thinking, or is it hiring more people where the government has to pay them? I mean, what's the actual best way to go about doing that, or can it be done?
Well, I think for a country like the United States, you've got pretty adequate enforcement when it comes to, everything from fish and game to whatever. But the problem we find almost everywhere else is rampant corruption, that they're just bought off. All the enforcement agencies are simply bought off, and bribery is a real problem.
I have another question for you, for any of you. Do you feel that COVID had a positive impact on giving the ocean a break? Is this the overfishing, or was it just something that we weren't aware about and everything was just business as usual with the bigger players?
Well, I think that it had some benefit, but overall, not a lot. In fact, one of the problems we found is that the poaching actually increased during COVID, because that kept the enforcement agencies away.
Oh,
so
same with the wildlife.
Poachers were taking advantage of that.
If only we could just have more holidays for our police, because without the blue, there is no green, and vice versa. But no one sees that. It's just slow suicide.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Paul Oleleitura. I'm a Tanzanian. I have a question to Captain Paul. What does plastic pollution, can plastic pollution disrupt marine ecosystem? My second question is, what are the effects of climate change to ocean in related to our human life cycle? Thank you.
Well, the first one, plastic pollution is insidious because it breaks down into microplastics, which get into everything, even infiltrating the bodies, of zooplankton, fishes. If anybody eats fish, you've got microplastics in your bodies. And, there's so many sources for microplastics, some of them that we don't even think of. For instance, automobiles going down the road. Every time they shed tiny bits of microplastic that gets washed into the ocean. A study in Norway found out that 40% of the microplastics came from automobile tires. So it's everywhere. It's not it's not just the heavy fishing gear and the plastic bottles and everything. Comes from many sources. And I think that microplastics do have the potential for causing a significant diminishment amongst biomass in the ocean. And what is the second part you were saying? What was it? The impact on humanity? Was that what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I am saying. I was saying, yeah.
Well,
I was saying that what are the effects of climate change to the ocean in related to our human being life cycle?
Well, if we don't solve the problems, especially I think the biggest problem being the diminishment of biodiversity in the ocean, if we don't solve these problems, then we're just simply going to go extinct, because nobody lives on this planet without living in accordance with the basic laws of ecology, of diversity, interdependence, and finite resources. And so we haven't proven to be very ecologically intelligent. And usually that's not a good sign when it comes to the survival of a species. I think that one of the problems is our outlook on life, our anthropocentric outlook on life, that everything was created for us. It's all about us. We're the only species that's important. And as long as we hold on to that philosophy, we're not really going to have a future. We do not live on this planet without the benefit of all those other species that support us.
Thank you, Captain Watson. I have another question from Hannah. Hannah, would you like to go ahead and ask?
Yes, thank you so much. It's for Captain Watson. You mentioned that you don't get too depressed about the future because we can't control it. But as a young person, I do find it difficult to stay positive with everything that's going on in the world. I just wanted to know what motivates you to keep going and doing the great work that you are doing. Thanks.
The most valuable lesson I learned was back in 1973. I was a volunteer medic for the American Indian Movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. And we were surrounded by 3,500 federal troops shooting at us. They killed 2 people. They wounded 46. We didn't have any hope of winning. And I went to Russell Means, who is the leader of the American Indian Movement. I said, what are we doing? We can't win here. The odds against us are overwhelming. And he told me something which stayed with me forever. And that is, he said, we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're not concerned about the odds against us. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right thing to do, and the right time to do it. Don't worry about the future. Focus everything on the present. And what you do in the present will define the future. And what we do in the present must be the exercise of passion, courage, and imagination. And that's what changes the world. And individuals can change the world. I mean, because of Diane Fossey, we have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Wingate, this Bermuda storm petrel didn't go extinct. Look what Greta Thunberg has accomplished. Individuals can have significant power to change things.
This is a question aimed at everyone. It's a little bit of a long one. So if you can all, I'm just going to read it out. My apologies. When educating communities, what difficulties have you encountered with removing the scientific wordings for more understandable language? For example, did you find that you had to change your mode of delivery, education, and communication to make the information more palatable for the general public? Also, which methods of communication delivery work the best? Was that clear?
Yes, that was clear.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the way that it was pretty easy to change, because what I did, like I said before when I was speaking, is that I wouldn't use the scientific terms like phylum chordata. I would talk to the people about like what is the common name. Like if I worked with a swell shark or a great white, they understood that, but they wouldn't understand the scientific terms. So that's how I would, as far as the terms, is I would just use common names that everybody is familiar with, or names that you could link, oh, that's what that species is. As far as delivering it, I mainly focused on the importance of not what scientifically is going on, but how emotionally and that's going to affect you. In other words, how can I explain this? The way we say that the ocean is our life support system, we get our food, our medicine, our oxygen, our air, everything, our weather from the ocean. And most people don't realize that. They really don't realize that's where everything comes from. So when you touch their hearts, you get them to understand that that's where your future and your livelihood and your breath and everything comes from. They start realizing, oh, well, we better make a difference here, because that means if that goes away, I can no longer breathe, or I can no longer eat, or I don't get clean, fresh water. When they realize that, that's when they start making the connection of, okay, what can I do? As far as the method, I try to do as much of in-person as possible, because that's when I have the most success of people really connecting and eye-opening on what's going on. But aside from that, I try to put out as many videos as possible, because any kind of connection to where they see a person, not just slides or not just music, but they see a person with or surrounded by what you're talking about, then they see more of a connection there, and it sinks in better. And it's not, very stiff and very boring and very, I am here to teach, kind of thing. You have to connect on an emotional level with everyone in their terms of the common names of everything, and show them how they connect. So basically, go back to the Native Americans, where we respected everything. We used and borrowed everything, and we grew from everything. I think that's the best way to go about doing it. You connecting the heart and in person as much as possible.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give Katie an opportunity to ask Dr. Penfold a question. Katie?
Hey there, thank you. So I think, and sorry if it's a bit of a vague one, but I'm really interested to know how the decision process and how you decide which species are worthy, I guess, of funding and of your research. Would you mind just explaining a little bit more about what goes into that decision process?
Gosh, that's a great question. And not an easy one to answer either. It's normally precipitated by something that's happened that needs to be addressed somewhat urgently, or it can be just resources are available in a certain area, and then the focus is to look for conservation projects in that particular area. That or maybe there's something that's been sort of like recently discovered, which would lend sort of like some sort of evidence as to why you might want to pursue that line of research a little bit more and try and figure out more things. But yeah, that's a great question. I don't think you tend to say, we have X number of dollars, what shall we pick? Normally something rises to the surface that needs to be addressed urgently, and that's how you start to focus on it.
I would personally like to thank each one of you, and this is my time to bid you adieu, and Stuart Smith's now going to hand over and just conclude our evening. Thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart. Okay,
thanks,
Stuart.
Teresa. Yeah, thanks to you all. I think
a professor entered the classroom and asked his students.
One of the pillars or cornerstones of Vikela.earth revolves around collaboration, and I think what we've heard tonight is that, and maybe this is a statement that what I see is the future of activism is probably in collaboration. So if people like scientists, like Dr. Linda, biologists, conservationists, environmentalists, and probably even investors collaborate, that can make a big impact on our environment and the society. And I guess we have the technology and online platforms where activists and experts can collaborate, get involved, communicate, share ideas, and join forces, etc. And I think that is, it's important, I think, when activists and experts collaborate, they become stronger And I think we can then make positive and lasting changes in what's happening in the world. And I know that Captain Paul spoke about the fact that ocean can look after itself. It's us, we need to look after ourselves so that the ocean can do its job. So saying that, I'd like to thank Dr. Linda Penfold, Kim and Captain Paul. I think your insights have given us a lot to think about. You've engaged us all, and I think that's very important. I'd also like to thank the Vikela.earth members who joined us this evening. I think you need to carry these messages forward and create awareness. Also then, a special thanks to the Vikela team who set this Boma up. Katie for spreading the word, Teresa for facilitating, and obviously for snagging Captain Paul. And of course, the driving force behind our Bomas is Nozipo Ndaweni. Thank you. She's where are you, Nozi? Hiding again. So Nozi is responsible for
everyone.
For setting up these Bomas, and yeah, I just hope that well, I know that we're going to do it for a few more. So thank you very much, Nozi, for that. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'll take the recordings, I'll trim them down, I'll compartmentalize them, and then make them available to you all. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.